Good evening for those of you who are in Europe, and good afternoon for particularly Northern America. You are at the broadcast of Sophia Institute. Sophia Institute is an institute established in Netherlands. We are largely dealing with the problems of the Muslim immigrant population in Europe and the intellectual discussions that the Muslims need to get involved. We started this broadcast about 12 minutes late, thanks to a technical issue. Our friends at Sophia Institute wanted the best, and as you know, the best is always the enemy of the good. We promise this is going to be a good discussion with Professor Adnan Aslan, but we wanted this to be also simultaneously translated into Turkish, the normal grassroots of Sophia Academy Institute, but unfortunately we failed to do so. Now, otherwise I will say you can switch to our Turkish broadcast in YouTube also. Still, check the chat box in our YouTube broadcast. Hopefully they will arrange the simultaneous Turkish translation and you can switch to the Turkish version if you are not able to follow the intellectual discussion in English. Today's topic is the need for a Muslim intellectual endeavor. The term intellectual here does not refer to a category of academics or thinkers. The intellectual is actually an attribute used for the endeavor. So it does not relate to a particular group of people whom we usually call intellectuals or academics, or if you wish an Arabic term, munawwar. That refers to an endeavor, a thinking or an activity based on reasonable thinking that each and every Muslim individual needs to deal with. My guest today is Professor Adnan Aslan. Adnan Aslan was educated in Turkey and England. He received his MA degree in King's College London back in 1990 and his PhD in Lancaster University in 1995. Professor Aslan published scholarly articles both in Turkish and English, several books also in both languages. His main interest includes the issue of religious pluralism, interreligious dialogue, Islam, modernity, and perennial philosophy. Together with Professor Aslan, myself, Kerim Balcı, we are teaching at US-based postgraduate institute, Respect Graduate School. We are both teaching on Sufi issues, philosophical issues, and so on. So we decided this to be a kind of dialogue between two people who are involved in problems of Muslims facing the challenges of modernity and so on. Of course, the main topic, main challenge of modernity has been the lack of an intellectual endeavor. If you wish to use the term backwardness of Muslim intellectual capacity, let me say. We will be dealing with why there is a pressing need at this almost postmodern era for Muslim intellectuals more than ever. A Muslim intellectual endeavor that involves both learning the West and also the sources of Islam, both being equipped by wisdom and compassion for humanity, but also methodology of Western sciences. In this talk, we will not only delineate the main characteristics of such individuals, but also show that the way and the method by which it would be possible to nurture such intellectual qualities. So don't think that this is particularly aiming at a category of intellectuals. No, it is actually referring to each and every single Muslim living in this world, particularly those of you who are living in the West. The potential of Muslim intellectual heritage has not totally been discovered and been made available for humanity. So our talk is not going to be dealing only with solutions to the problems of Islam. Rather, we will be dealing how Islam can offer solutions to the problems of humanity in general. Dr. Aslan, welcome to this talk. We are going to try to finish this within 1 hour, hopefully, so as to keep it brief and intact. My first question to you, Professor Aslan, is by the end of the 19th century, we have seen several Muslim scholars who had already realized that the real challenge of the Muslim world was no longer its military or economic inferiority, but its scientific element. Because the madrasas, the traditional education institutions of the Muslim world, were no longer able to meet the challenge that was coming from positive sciences and so on. Many, including Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, suggested that the real jihad, the real religious endeavor of this time was an intellectual one. On the other hand, when we speak particularly from the perspective of traditional conservative societies, the term intellectual has connotations that has a distaste of the tradition. The intellectual has to be critical of the tradition. The intellectual has to be, thinking out of box, free thinkers, but free from the shackles of the tradition also. Said Nursi suggested that winning over the civilized world would be possible only through persuasion. Now I'm going to ask this question. Can we persuade the non-Muslim world about the beauties of Islam with the kind of intellectual capacity we have today? Are we still, suffering from the backwardness that late 19th century Muslim intellectuals were complaining from?
Thank you very much, Kerim Hocam. It was a very good introduction. Thank you for this question. And this question embodies many questions within it. But let me start with the asking question of what would be the most important challenge in this century for Muslims? What is the challenge of Muslims in this century? So the answer for me is a simple. The challenge is the modernity. Let me explain this, what I mean by that. In the pre-modern world, the struggle between the nations was with physical might, weapons, and they will fight in the war, and they will get their share, and they will overpower each other. So after modernity, this dramatically, or let me say fundamentally, changed this attitude. So people, overcoming the others or influencing the other nations, it is very much related with science and knowledge. Challenge of modernity is the challenge of ideologies. Before was the nations. And on the one side, the nation, let us say Muslim nation, the other side is the Christian nation. Or in the beginning, for instance, on the one side, the Muslims, and other side, Byzantine or the Sassanid Empire. So the nations of empire each other. So with the great transformation achieved after the French Revolution, this nation state changed the whole structure. No, it is not the nation, it is the ideologies, ideas. We have to fight with it. So, what was the greatest challenge before modernity for Muslims? If you ask this question to me, my answer is Aristotelian philosophy. Aristotelian philosophy was the greatest challenge. Let me say ancient Greek philosophy. So it was a challenge, a mental and, let me say, challenge in thought. So this challenge has been encountered by the Muslims.
So you are referring to the 8th century and 9th century, where Muslims were first encountering with Greek philosophy. Okay.
Yes. So this great challenge was a, let me say, a challenge of philosophy, is a mental challenge. So Muslims received that very well, and they produced their own philosopher, like Ibn Sina, Farabi, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Balcı, etc. So they confronted first this challenge, and they will, let me say, interpret it in a way. For instance, Ibn Rushd is criticizing Ibn Sina, saying that you did not understand well Aristotle. So they were competing to understanding Aristotle. Then they confronted and they interpreted. Then after that, all these theologians, scholars of the Kalam, and other scholars, they start understand this Greek, ancient Greek philosophy, Aristotelian philosophy, and they answered, of course. They defended the religion very well. So in this case, of course, Ghazali was very important, and he played a very important role, first to understanding philosophy and the criticizing it from the perspective of religious perspective, but the method of the Imam Ghazali was philosophical. We are going to come to address this issue. So this was a, let me say, intellectual challenge, and defended intellectually. But my dear friend, the challenge of modernity, it is not only intellectual, it is social, it is institutional. The whole Islamic world transformed, socially transformed, institutionally transformed. We are all imitating or building institution of the modernity, and we are living on it. So this change was the great change, because it affected our understanding. It affected our way of life. Aristotelian challenge did not affect the way of life of the Muslims. Muslims were living in according to their tradition, but modernity transformed wholly our way of life, our understanding of life, worldview, our understanding of art and the science. So how can...
Professor Aslan, let me ask this. Are you trying to say that just because the early philosophers of Islam were able to take on the challenge of Aristotelian philosophy and make its criticism and internalize it and use it, even excel in it, even become better than the Greeks themselves, so that they managed to stop the defective sides of philosophy to change the Muslim world institutionally or socially, but they benefited from the wisdom in it. Whereas when we met the modernity challenge, our intellectuals were not well prepared to take the challenge on its terms and respond to it. And in the end, actually, we were conquered not only by means of our minds, but also our social institutions and so on.
That's right. That's right. More than this, first, actually, our philosophers defended Islamic faith very well. And Greek philosophy actually, in a certain way, helped and become the instrumental to producing well-taught, well-developed, sophisticated kind of theology, kalam. It was the help of the Greeks. So, for instance, you are so familiar about this, is the logic, of course. Logic was the very instrumental, and it is a Greek logic. So they did their job well. As you said, we are not aware of the challenge, let alone producing a good and suitable, convenient answer for this challenge. So I am going to, we are going to explain this more, but let me say this. This all transformation, a social transformation, a transformation of our understanding, transformation of our thinking, made by the modernity. So we are now faced this great challenge. So how can we answer this challenge? It is first, it has to be understood well, and to see the root of the modernity, and it is very much related with the thinking and the philosophy of the modern philosophy after Descartes, and we will talk about that.
Professor Aslan, I do understand that if, I'm speaking as a kind of historical visual thinking, if by the end of 19th century, Muslim intellectuals were well prepared, like Ghazali, for example, who studied philosophy, became the best of his time by means of philosophy. And he wrote his, first of all, Maqasid al-Falasifa, the aims of the philosophers. And only then he wrote Tahafut al-Falasifa, the rebuttal of the philosophy, and in their own terms. You are saying that if we had such strong intellectuals in late 19th century, we could have actually used the ideological shift in the West to the good of Islam also. So, for example, the materialistic philosophy or positivism or naturalism that emerged after the French Revolution could have been imbued into Islamic studies also, and we could have found ourselves today, by means of theological discussions, enriched by modernity, whereas the intellectuals of the early 20th century, late 19th century in Islam had a blind rejectionism to what was happening in the West. Why was this, this hatred? They didn't have the capacity to meet the challenge, or it was because of anti-colonialist sentiments that they didn't want to get anything from the West?
Okay, so let me answer first the methodology of studying West, which I see from the Ghazali's method. So what I am trying to say here, we fail to understand modernity, and we fail to understand the West and Western thought. So why this is so, I'm going to analyze that. But before that, okay, how Ghazali encountered with the Greek philosophy. First, he understood well, within its own terms. This is very important. He understood philosophy philosophically. What people say is, wrote the name of Ibn Sina in the first page of the Maqasid al-Falasifa, the intentions of the philosophers. You do not need to change any of it. What does it mean, this? He performed excellent, high first grade of philosophical thought in the Maqasid. Then after this, he wrote Tahafut al-Falasifa, incoherence of the philosophers. So here, if we are facing with the Western understanding and Western thought and Western philosophy, we need to use this method. First, to understand the West as it is, not as we understood, or as we wish to understand, as it is, within its own terms. Then, after that, we will be able to criticize or offer something which people can really pay attention. What is the sign of this? For instance, let us say you are writing a critique of Kant philosophy. So Muslim intellectual has to produce a work that all Kantian philosophers, they will pay attention. They will say, wow, this is really something different. So we are, as you said, why this is the case? Because we are so much in our comfort zone, and we are very happy in that. And it is not easy to come out that. So let me come to the first, why we are going to do this. Actually, Said Nursi, great scholar and the Gnosis, and he actually determined, made the point, which is extremely important. What was the point? Point was this. So the power of weapons, physical might is over. Now, why? Because of the nation state. In the nation state, there are particular institutions like military, like police. They will do the defense. Before nation states, every probably individuals, male individuals, they are obliged to defend their country. So jihad was common, and it is responsibility for everyone and every Muslim. Now, because of this change, overcoming civilized people is only possible by persuasion and conviction. So how can you persuade the people? What sort of means you use to persuade the civilized people? Obviously, this is persuasion as intellectual endeavor, as you perfectly pointed out. Persuasion is an intellectual endeavor. So jihad in our centuries must be intellectual jihad. We need to persuade the people through convincing them. Conviction, you see, it is a very interesting persuasion. Is something like needs to be, has to be peaceful, has to be sophisticated. Okay, you need to understand your audience. You need to communicate well with the words and the terms which they use. So now look at the Islamic world. We are very happy to communicate to each other. And we use the vocabulary which is very sound and very peaceful, very nice for us. But this vocabulary and this language has no meaning outside our own comfort zone. This is the main problem. We need to produce a language which would be very meaningful for others. We use and we produce the language for ourselves very much, and we are very happy with that. What's wrong with that? I'm not criticizing this, but if you are intellectual, if you are believing that Islam is not for only wisdom for human beings, you need to find the language to communicate with the whole humanity. Then philosophy is the language, my dear.
That is precisely was the issue that I wanted to raise.
Please.
And, you know, Muslim intellectuals were, of course, aware of the need to appeal to the minds of the West, of the whole world, and so on. But they still prefer to stay in their comfort zone. When we were speaking about this issue before with you, you used the term tawattun, meaning settlement in their own, you know, intellectual comfort zones. And I said, then are you suggesting a kind of hijrah out of the settlements and intellectual hijra in this world. And you said, I'm asking for a hijra, just like Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi suggested that one of your legs should stay in your watan, in your original intellectual home, but the other leg should travel around 72 nations. Now, this is a beautiful smile, but on the other hand, I want to ask this question, is it lack of capacity, or is it laziness at the side of the Muslim intellectuals who knew they needed to do that, but they didn't? Or are there systemic reasons that prevented that?
Very good question. Very good question. Thank you. Many things, of course. What you said is true. Okay, let us talk about this comfort zone. Why we are so happy in our comfort zone? Because it is pleasing. And so where it comes from, actually, it comes from our faith, it comes from our tradition, it comes from our trust in God, our trust in the Quran. So what is wrong? It is not wrong. This is good for common people. It has to be. Everybody, we, you, everybody needs such a comfort zone. Because, in our what is one of the important characteristics of modernity is lack of security. Lack of security. This is the main problem, my dear. Lack of security. We need security. And our tradition provides security for us. Our faith provides security for us. Our religion, our trust in Quran, our trust in God, tawakkul, our trust in the tradition of the Prophet, and trust our community provides a security, and beautiful security. Many of the psychological problems stems from that lack of security. Anxiety is the greatest problem, and other many psychological disturbances, which is very much related with the lack of security. So we are very happy about that. And nothing wrong with this. But this is for common. Okay. So intellectuals, they are duty to go over and go beyond such comfort zone. Intentionally, using by will, they need to come out such intellectual comfort zone. Why? Because jihad is this. You cannot do the jihad at home. You need to go out. So at home, no, our work, we go out is to see the other ideologies, other worldviews. So beautifully put by yourself and the Maulana's great findings, great sayings that, we need to put the one of our leg at the center of our ideas, our worldviews, at the center of our traditions and the Quran. The other leg would travel all the nations. Can we do that? Yes. Why? Because we are confident. We cannot afraid of any ideology. We cannot afraid of any worldviews. Do you remember that I was talking about the traveler and the wayward? Traveler enjoys traveling. Wayward cannot enjoy traveling because wayward doesn't have home. Traveler has a home. So our worldview, my dear friend, is our worldview is our home. And we are not afraid of traveling. That means knowing other cultures, knowing other philosophies, knowing other, let me say, ideas and ideologies. We will get benefit from them because we know, we are confident, we have home, and we return home. When we return home, we are not the same person. okay, enriched in many respects, and especially intellectually, we will find ourselves enriched. So let me elaborate what I'm trying to say. One, intellectual or comfort zone is okay. It has to be. It is a common for every single Muslim. But those who are intellectuals, they have to travel. They have to go to the hijrah. Why? Because it is our jihad now. So our jihad in this century is an intellectual. Who said this? Sidners. If you interpret his saying, this is obviously, clearly he's saying this.
Professor Aslan, of course, you said one of the reasons of being stuck in the comfort zone, although it is needed for the common man, and occasionally for the intellectual also, you are not advocating a complete destruction of that comfort zone. You say we need that comfort zone as the reference point that we need to turn back each time. So we need to be travelers, not, somebody stateless. Let me say intellectual statelessness is not something desired. But on the other hand, you also said that comfort zone mentality is, a product of our culture, of our society, of our understanding of our faith, and so on. Of course, if an intellectual wants to come out of that comfort zone, occasionally they need to challenge the traditional understanding of their own religion, and there comes to the picture self-criticism and free thinking about religious issues also. We have seen in the 19th century and 20th century there had been regimes in the Muslim world, secularizing regimes that is looking towards West or Western mentality, but they had no link to the previous comfort zone of Islamic thinking, whereas we have seen religious scholars who are blindly closing the gates to the Western ideology and not even studying to respond to that. Abdul Kerim Surush was once asked about the role of the Muslim intellectual in the postmodern era, and he said that it was to retain a critical distance between themselves and both the secular political elite and the conservative ulama, and have a critical eye of each of them. But the point is, does this need to be a conflictual relationship? Do we need to see intellectuals always in a fight with their, common man? The fact that we need to go out of our comfort zone, does that necessitate a kind of fighting with the people who are left behind in the common in the comfort zone, particularly the ulama, the classical traditional ulama, who advocate staying behind? I'm thinking of Sufi tariqas, for example, which are usually against any kind of Western ideology, Western thinking style, and so, or even methodology. Now, is there a way of bridge building instead of conflict between an intellectual thinking and the comfort zone?
Very good question. Thank you. I try to answer your important question. First, what I would say, let me put it this way, to how we see ourselves, how we should see the West. So the first thing I would say that our own tradition and history is a source for our knowledge, source for our worldview. The West is the subject of our knowledge. So the role is different. I am not happy to change the role. So the role of the Islamic tradition is provide worldview, provide let me say, comfort zone, which is necessary. The role of the Western philosophy is to becoming a challenge and the subject. So the first thing, our classical ulama are not aware of this challenge at all. Why they are not aware? Many things related. So instead of returning to our tradition, because if we are trying to comprehend our tradition as a whole, it would take ages. It is not so much possible. So we need to be selective. How can we select? According to our problems. So who is causing the problems? Modernity. And you find the problems and you can find that particular problem in our tradition. A clear example. Let me give you an example. The notion of freedom is totally different from the West in our tradition. In the West, notion of freedom is very much related with the exercising our will and the desires. You satisfy your desires and you are free. Whatever you want to do, you become free through satisfying your wills and your desires. But this is consuming yourself. From the Islamic and Sufi point of view, this is a carnal self. Nafs ammara is let me say, is active so much in this notion of freedom. But in our notion of freedom, we are tied with the world. When you cut this tie, you became free. How you can be free? You are so free because you don't need, no one really prevents you thinking and doing what you want. In a sense, you are not so much tied in the you are not totally dependent upon the world. You dependent upon the transcendental power, God Almighty. So the more you're dependent of the God Almighty, the less you will be dependent of the world, and you become totally free. This is the idea of freedom. So if we are going to talk about this, first we need to know, let us say, what is the notion of freedom in Western philosophies, in Immanuel Kant, Friedrich Nietzsche, and John Locke. Then, okay, depending upon our own tradition, we compare these two notion of freedom and trying to defend our notion of freedom against these Western philosophies. So let me come to this. This is a role of Muslim intellectuals. What should be the role of Muslim intellectuals? So, of course, knowledge. The first producing the knowledge, of course. What sort of knowledge? Western thought, philosophies, and the modernity as a whole, together with institutions, is producing knowledge and depending upon the knowledge. What sort of knowledge this is? It is a rational knowledge. Okay. What sort of rationality they use? Max Weber says it is instrumental rationality. So we are, in a sense, this is one layer of rationality. And interestingly, Nicholas of Cusa says that reason is like a slave girl who pays, works for him. So we are talking about the particular reason in modernity. Is there any other things that? Yes. What I would say, sapiential knowledge. What is it then? This is, okay, let me say, the knowledge in the first sense, or reason in the first sense, rationality in the first sense, comes from investigating the causes, but these causes, immediate causes. Whole of the university disciplines, starting from biology, physics, astronomy, every single discipline of the university is involving in determining the immediate cause. But they never think about this immediate cause based on the cause of all causes. Musabbibul asbab, the cause of all causes. When you start relating the knowledge, the cause of all causes, you are entered into another dimension. What is this dimension? It's the sapiential knowledge. What we call it, irfan or gnosis. So in sapiential knowledge, it is based on two things, spirituality and morality. So what we have now, this instrumental reasoning brought about a knowledge which is independent of morality, independent of spirituality. That is why we are facing tremendous problems. So it has to be, let me say this. This is a phrase I borrowed from the Sayyid Hussein Nasser. To know is to be saved. To know is to be saved. So the knowledge is related with your spiritual development. The more you know, the more spiritually and morally you advance. Can you apply this to the modern universities? No, my dear. No relation with spirituality, no relation with the morality. That is why what I am trying to say here, in that case, the whole Western philosophy is food for thought, is a food for thought. But it is necessary. Why it is necessary? Because they determine the whole world. Actually, we are talking about the West. There is no West now. Globalized world. Go China. China now becoming very proud of becoming communist and also capitalist together. So where in Japan and everywhere, the West kind of thinking and the model of thinking and their lifestyle and their understanding and the art, the modern art is widespread, is everywhere. So in that case, how can we look at our tradition? I would say we look at our tradition in terms of values. Oh, I will come this. The second important way, or let me say rationality, Max Weber is talking about value-based rationality. Value-based. He says this is different from the instrumental rationality, from the modern rationality. It's totally different. I agree. Our rationality, my dear friend, is the value-based rationality. It must be value-based rationality.
But on the other hand, you are saying that even the universities in the Muslim world are lacking that dimension. They're all instrumental, knowledge producing mechanisms. When we look at the Enlightenment, we see there were centers of knowledge production or intellectual production at the basis of European Enlightenment. And it, in fact, continues on. I remember Florence, for example, the earliest centers of knowledge production or intellectual production, let me say, or Vienna, Paris, London. And then some universities took the load of, burden of producing future intellectuals like Oxford University. And so when we look at the Muslim world, we do not find such centers, not cities. Well, I may think of Qom in Iran, which is actually quite involved in reading philosophy, particularly German philosophy. But other than that, no cities. I cannot say Istanbul is a center of learning, or Konya, for example, at the time of Maulana was a center of learning, or even smaller places like Tillo in Siirt was a center of learning at one time in the 16th century. But we don't have such centers. We don't have such universities. Not even a think tank that is dealing with those issues, particularly, value-based reason or sapiential knowledge. Why?
Well, my dear, it is very much related with the understanding of knowledge. And I used to have a very good friend in Turkey because of the political chaos. We separated each other. And he used to claim that institutions was the enemy of knowledge. Very strange. At the beginning, I did not pay attention what he's claiming. But later, when he was trying to produce some evidences, he's comparing first and second and third century Hijri after Hijra, how the knowledge is being really expanding and producing everywhere independently. There was no institution. There was no madrasa in a sense as an institution. But there was a person yourself, a great ulama, you go and a masjid and you start halakha, people comes and sits, everybody open to come. Okay, they will understand you, they will carry on. They don't understand you, go to the another ulama, another alim, and they go another scholar and so on and so on. It was so independent. And you pick up, there is no obligation, there is no money, there is no enrolling, there is no nothing, there is no diploma. Excellent. There is one important university in Paris, Collège de France. Very strange, because they don't give you a diploma, and there is no enrollment as well. It is because these first those people who are following the Ibn Rushd, they established this Collège de France, and still going on, and very prestigious. For instance, I think, as far as I know, Foucault was one of the let me say, academician in there, and others. Anyway, so in coming in that position, what I would like to say, so again, these the universities I am coming as an institutions. So I don't know, is it really so logical to return our root, knowledge producing centers independent of the institution? This is a wild imagination. But let me say this, at least what I see in the 20th century, great universities of the world. So I am observing all universities. I was teaching one of the important prestigious university in United States, Notre Dame University. 2 years I taught there, and I come to close to understand to the system of the university. So what I would say, the first thing, Universities, as I taught the first criticism, it is very much related with the immediate cause, not the cause of all causes. So it is related with the rational and instrumental reasoning and the knowledge which is produced by the instrumental reasoning. This is one of the important criticisms. So it is not value-based. So knowledge independent of spirituality and independent of morality. The second important criticism is that they were disconnected from the great and big questions. Philosophy was disconnected with the big questions. They don't ask these great big questions, questions of, let me say, epistemologies, existentialism. They are now very much in the minute issues. And as I observe might be not correct at all, but what I would see, I will share with my audience. Sociology is disconnected with the social problems. Look at these universities. They have great departments of sociology. Look at the societies. What do you see? I observe many social problems. Why they are not related to each other? And psychology was disconnected from the person, from the individual. Why? Because psychology doesn't believe in self, soul, spirit, heart, the inner senses. They don't care about that. So what is the role of universities in the West? The role of universities is generation of power, nothing else. Don't care about the society. And they are very good generation of power. But my dear, this power without wisdom.
Professor Aslan, I do understand that when you make the distinction between, instrumentalized knowledge and value-based knowledge and spirituality, the heart and so on, of course, when we say value cannot be automatically produced by just the intellect. You need kind of delivered given information. It is either given by God or by previous generations and so on. But modernity denied the authority of the given knowledge that came down to us by our forefathers or by revelation, whatever you refer to as the given knowledge. So you are saying that we need universities who reestablishes the authority of the given knowledge and does not only deal with the gained knowledge.
Exactly.
How will we reestablish? I'm thinking of a university, say on biology, that does also reestablishes the authority of the Quran or the given knowledge. How will we manage to do that?
Yes, very difficult question. Okay. So let me first try to explain the difference between this term given and gained knowledge. So the West now, in general, they are based on gained knowledge. They produce the knowledge independently, even independent of religion. So what is truth in the West is being determined by the scientists, social scientists, intellectuals. Imagine that this is a big river. So every individual scholars, they pour their own, let me say, bucket to this river. But this river, they determine their own course. as an intellectuals and the scholars and the scientists, they cannot really direct the course of this knowledge is going. They are determining, they are going which their own. They determine their own course. Okay, having said that, you see, now one of the most important things for us to ponder upon about this intellectual, what you said, value-based thinking and the reason. How can we produce that for this? So it is, first, it comes from our own worldview. We cannot separate. We cannot really divide ourselves. One side is the secular, the other is the religious. So why we are talking about this way? Because the whole modernity is based on the secularization. So what is secularization? Secularization is diminishing the power on the role of religion in public domain and also in private domain. Diminishing the role and effect of the religion in public and private domain. This is a secularization. So the whole universities, whole producing knowledge made religion irrelevant, my dear. Irrelevant for life, irrelevant for state, irrelevant for art, irrelevant for knowledge. It is just an accessoire. It's nice to have, stay here, but cannot be assumed a global principal role of the religion. We are not happy with that. What we need is resacralization. Okay, what is resacralization? Putting the sacred at the center. How can we do that? We based on given knowledge. That is the revelation. But my dear friend, you would ask, but your revelation is a particular revelation. It is in Islam. So how can you universalize that? That's a great question. At the beginning, okay, what I would say, putting the sacred at the center is a universal move. Every tradition has a sacred. Chinese tradition has a Confucianism, Taoism, the sacred. And Japan have the Zen Buddhism, that is their sacred. On India, Hinduism and Buddhism, they are sacred. Now, every great nation has their own sacred. So I am inviting them to pay their own sacred. So putting the sacred at the center is a great move, and that is against modernity. And that is making an epistemic shift from the modern understanding of knowledge.
So clearly you are not
Please.
suggesting to inject Islamic revelation into the Western academic sphere, but you are suggesting that, you know, all nations have their own given knowledges, which carry value, spirituality, and so on. If they are actually injected into their, you know, secularizing and, as you said, power generating universities, then there will be an epistemic shift, which will lead towards a new kind of university where the inner dimension of man or learning is also existent.
Excellent. Let me congratulate you. Thank you. You understand very well, and I hope you did very well.
Professor Aslan, I have a question in the chat box on our YouTube. By the way, you can ask your questions on the chat box. As far as I can for law, I will be asking that question. Isn't there also a certain point of apologetism in the idea of, regarding the Western knowledge as a challenge and trying to respond to that? Isn't it a kind of a complex also? Can we just not disregard Western knowledge and be happy in our own given knowledge sphere?
Good. No. So let me say why it is not apologetic. Why we need to know, we need to understand, appreciate reality. What is reality then? Reality, let me put it this way, is this secularization and this understanding of Western understanding and Western way of life is global phenomenon. It is not just with us. It is not just with the Muslim world. Whole world is a global phenomenon. This is one thing. You deny, you accept, doesn't matter. The fact cannot change. The second thing is the secularization. It's a fact. Religion lost its power, its role. Its role in public and private domain. This is also fact. Deny, accept doesn't change the fact. So this is a challenge, of course, if you are believing Islam as a sacred center. If you want to leave the religion, okay, you need to understand that. So what happened actually? Religion lost its social reality. So social reality is a very strong reality. You cannot go against it. There was a chapter, social reality, I was teaching. When I was trying to teach the social reality, I do one experiment, a simple experiment. I say to my student, look at me. Everybody's looking, and I start taking off my shirt. And I stop in the middle. I said, why I cannot take off my shirt? This is legal. This is not against the religion. This is moral. Why I cannot do that? Because of the power of social reality. Very strong. So religious was one of the prime factors which construct the social reality. Now it is lost. So the social reality negates the religion now, in general. So it is not about the establishing Islamic State, and these are not the point. If the social reality is being working against the religion. Look at one of the countries, let me say Iran. In their the religion lost the power of social reality. So state cannot really make the people religious at all. State only produce hypocrites. Okay, religious in the public domain, secular in the private domain. And this is a typical the case in the Iran. So why I am talking about this? It is not apologetic. What is apologetic actually? There used to be the case, for instance, rationality. Oh, West is rational. We are more rational than West. So this is apologetic. Or what is then the human rights? Of course, we are great and we far exceed in the human rights in the West. Whatever they say, we're trying to find something similar in our tradition and claim to be happy and also very, let me say, proud of possessing such a qualities. This is what you call it, apologetic. My position, I don't think so.
Professor Aslan, now we already reached the end of our 1 hour, but I want to finish and close this beautiful discussion with this question. Now, you are suggesting that Muslim intellectuals should first internalize Western knowledge or the challenge of modernity, but then inject into it the given knowledge of Islam, and hopefully other nations also take in or re-sacralize knowledge through their own given knowledge system, and then we will have value-based knowledge production mechanisms. So your project or what you are advocating is not only something that will change in the mindset of Muslim intellectuals, but a global change. Of course, you are saying the challenge is also a global challenge. It's not only about us. You are also saying that not responding is a response, but it's a bad response. So we cannot just disregard, because this is the social reality. We are living in it, and in fact, it is not the situation that religion and secular knowledge are totally separate, which are not influencing each other. In fact, whereas in the past religion was creating social reality, now the social reality, which is secular Western positivist knowledge, it is reshaping religion. It is not that we are aloof. We are actually subject to secular knowledge, which is changing our religion. Well, under such kind of a diagnosis, do you still have hope that one day Muslim intellectuals will come to a capability of being able to both internalize, but then respond and use the material that are produced in the West, the attained knowledge, for the sake of the given knowledge?
Certainly. This is the sign. What is the sign? Our talk. Our talk here. Hopefully, yes, it is the sign, although it is small. It is the sign of such a transformation. But let me explain and depict two important points with regard to this. One is the book. It is written by Francis Fukuyama, The End of History. In that book, he is talking about is there any global alternative to the liberalism or capitalist liberalism? Why he is talking about the end of the history? Because he said this was the whole aim. So we reached that aim. We achieved the task. There is no beyond. Socialism is over, and capitalism and liberalism is now our own aim, and we achieved that. But of course, there are many nations. They are very much behind. Okay, they are very much behind of this. So they will come to the turn. This is better, is it?
Yeah, much better. Now.
Okay, so they will come to the terms of the liberal capitalism. So the process for them is still carry on, but systematic. If you are thinking about the system, there is no other system. But there are two alternatives. One is the nationalism, the other Islam. He says, okay, nationalism cannot be alternative. Why? Because it starts from the nation. Cannot comprehend the whole globalization. So you cannot claim to be you are the great nation, and this gives the right of claiming other nation, we are greater. So this is not the way. He says Islam, although seems to be alternative, but is not alternative. Why? Because he's asking this question. Go and ask the young person, youngster, in Paris, in Moscow, in New York, in London, ask about Islam. What they know? They know almost nothing. If they know negative things. So how this could be, how can you imagine that this is going to be the alternative for the global world? He's right. He's right. So what is my suggestion? It is not whole Islamic, it's the sacred. Okay, alternative is resacralization, not re-Islamization, resacralization. Then through their sacred, they will come close to the Islam with their own will, with their understanding. As long as we can shift that, this is one thing. Is the second thing, I am very, very optimistic about the mission of the Hizmet movement, which I relate with this. Why I am so optimistic? Because two things Hizmet movement managed to achieve. One is the globalization. Physically globalized, you can see almost in every country, physically globalized. No other social movement achieved that. The second, mentally globalized. Interreligious dialogue is a good sign of mental globalization of the Hizmet movement. These two things. The third thing is the value-based, is not instrumental. So I see many of my dear colleagues, they don't understand Hizmet movement. They start criticizing it from the perspective of rationality, which I criticize, instrumental rationality. They are the sons and daughters of instrumental rationality, and they start criticizing it from that perspective. This is sad, very unfortunate, because Hizmet does not dependent upon the instrumental rationality. It is based on the value-based rationality. And you and anybody, invited, welcome to criticize from the value perspective. And we don't see such a criticism at all. And that is not working. So you ask me whether I am hopeful. I am indeed very hopeful. And I am kind of optimist. A friend of mine saying that uncurable optimism, uncurable optimism, I accept that. But nevertheless, it is not something just imaginary. My optimism based on some real, let me say, understanding of the happenings and the movement. So, as I told you, my optimism based on three things, and just to summarize, resacralization, which is open for everybody. So it is not something I am claiming. So I am responding the challenge of the Francis Fukuyama, saying that I am not asking to ask the person who's living in New York, a youngster, to be a Muslim. What I am asking to discover your own sacred, my dear. Why? Because spirituality and morality comes from there. Okay, so this is not so, let me say, implausible, just imaginary. It is real. The one was that. Is the second was about the Hizmet movement. And in Hizmet movement, Hizmet achieved the globalization, mental and physical globalization, and also produced a value-based rationality, which is extremely important. Let me give you one example, which is very much the case. So in Hizmet, in the early times, they sent the people to do, let me say, Siberia. And one of the person sent there, okay, if anybody asked me, okay, whether we really sent him, I will totally object. Why? Because that person doesn't know English. He never been to the foreign countries, and doesn't have the experience of dealing with the people there. Why I am thinking that way? Because my mind works use the instrumental reasoning. But when I shifted the reasoning to the value-based reasoning, that was a great move, because that person is a certain spiritual and moral integrity and quality. That's it. And you can set whenever you want. Doesn't matter. Knowledge doesn't matter. Language doesn't matter. Something else.
Amazing. So I think this is not only a good place to stop, but also this is already inviting future discussion about how a movement like Hizmet movement can actually contribute to re-establishment of the authority of given knowledge. And suddenly, what looks like as an activism movement becomes relevant for intellectual, activism also, intellectual or rational thinking also. I think that that point needs further discussion, and I hope Sophia Academy is going to be interested in future of such discussions. Professor Aslan, thank you very much for this, optimistic, uncurable optimism about the future of the world, not only of the Muslim world, but also of the world. Those of you who joined us today, we started our broadcast a bit late because of technical difficulties. We once again apologize for that. We dealt with a lot of issues. We moved to the first renaissance of Islam in the early 8th and 9th centuries, where Islam was challenged by Aristotelian logic, and we saw how Muslim intellectuals were able to internalize that knowledge and use it for their own theological needs and so on, how it contributed to Islam, how it actually enriched theological discussions in the Muslim world. Whereas by the 19th century, when modernity was establishing its own authority of gained knowledge and denying the authority of given knowledge, unfortunately, the Muslim intellectual was not well equipped and, in fact, not willing to meet the challenge and respond to that, let alone, but also to take it as a food for thought, as Professor Aslan used the beautiful term, that would actually enrich Islamic thinking. We are looking for such a future where, Kant will contribute to Islam. Well, Sartre will contribute to Islam. And we can see Foucault already in the thinking style of Professor Aslan contributed to our understanding of the future of Islam and of the Muslim, of the whole world. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Aslan, and thanks to Sophia Academy for hosting this event. Good evening to all of you.
You are very welcome. I am very pleased with your questions and the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.